everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, evening. I'm Irina Chismash. I'm host and your host for today's webinar, and I'm thrilled to be here with you. It's my pleasure to bring together some brilliant minds as we count down the days to Christmas. Today, we are wrapping up the year with a special session featuring some of the most influential voices in customer success. With no further ado, I want to invite Anika, Zubair, Erika, Villareal, and JanYoung. I hope I pronounced your names correct. I can't wait to dive into a candid chat about the roller coaster that was 2023 and a sneak peek into what 2024 might hold for us in customer success. Ladies, a warm welcome to Anika, Erika, and Jen. Thanks so much for joining us and taking out the time to share your insights. Welcome. I really want to thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thanks so much for having us, Irina. We're excited to have these conversations. Very interesting to think about what next year will be coming. So let's dive in.
Definitely.
Before we do that, I wanna start with a few housekeeping items, and then we deep dive directly into the topic of today. And so I want to say that the event is being recorded, so rest assured, if you cannot join online, no worries. We're gonna send you a copy, and we're gonna definitely publish the recording. We value your participations, so feel free to pose your questions using the question tab. It's top bottom right of your device, or use the chat function. While we talk, I'll also try to monitor. We'll try to incorporate the questions in the discussion, or we'll save them for the Q&A session at the very end. Okay, so to kick things off, I want to begin with a thought experiment. So I want to ask you, if you could go back to the start of 2023 with the knowledge you have now, what would be your initial steps in customer success? And I want to start with you, Anika. What would you approach? What would be your approach for the beginning of 2023 with your current wisdom?
Yeah, I wish it's a great question. I wish I had a magic ball for every year that we can go back and maybe change what has happened. But I think in the ever-changing world in customer success that we find ourselves in, it is tough to predict. And so I'm really excited to jump into this topic. But if I were to look back at this last year and start to think about what I would have changed or what could have changed now that I know what I know, nothing went to plan. I think that 2023 basically ended up being focusing on sustainable growth and taking customer success back into, I don't want to say it's basics, but the fundamentals of focusing on customer outcomes and driving revenue for your business based on customer outcomes. And if I were to look back and reflect, I think the start of 2023 was a lot of what we were experiencing of the tailwinds of COVID, or 2020 and 2021, which was grow at all costs, make sure that we were really ramping up and preparing for, the SaaS roller coaster to continue to succeed and grow. And, it much like we didn't expect to be in lockdown or COVID, we didn't really expect 2023 for us to end up being where, hey, we need to really watch our budgets. We need to really watch how we're growing, where we're investing, and what we're doing in customer success. So to answer your question, nothing was planned. And if I were to go back and change the plans, I'd say focusing on sustainable growth and making sure that everything that my CS team is doing is tied back to that revenue piece. Those are my two pieces, I would say, if I went back with the magic ball and could change things.
Thanks, Anika, for those insights. Erika, what's your perspective on this? If you had the do-over of 2023, what would your first action in CS be?
Yes, of course. I wish I could do that. I wish I could go back in time to 2023, the start, and everything's perfect, and I don't know, just like having a great year. But if I had to reflect on how 2023 went, one thing that I would definitely prioritize is customer data. A little bit of background. In my company at Eptura, this year we went through a lot of changes, organizational changes. We went through acquisitions, we went through mergers. We brought together 9 different products from 9 different companies. And to say that bringing all of that data together into one single system was very, very, very challenging. The fact that CSMs didn't have any visibility into what was happening with their customers, no way to see the big picture, no way to identify any positive or negative trends, because all of the data is wonky. We're trying to fix it, and we're trying to make sure that we improve on how we report on customer data. So whenever CSMs were trying to figure out what was happening with their customers, by the time that we were seeing a red flag, it was already too late to act. So if I had to restart a year, I would definitely prioritize spending more resources or more time to bring in all of this data together. So CSMs have this data moving on forward for next year, and making sure that we're using that data strategically to build, different success plans, different strategies for us to be able to bring them back into a better usage, better engagement. And CSMs have more information on how to better help these customers achieve their business outcomes. That's what I would do if I had to return to 2023 January.
Definitely interesting points, and there were a few things that I want to dive if we have the time. Jen, over to you. How would you appreciate 2023 customer success strategy?
Well, I think that both Anika and Erika have really brought up some fantastic points, both in terms of the way that we've seen all of SaaS technology move from, because money started to cost something, we saw all of it move from growth at any cost to profitability. And so sustainable and durable growth has really required our attention, right? And when you look at that, then data is, something that's at the core of that. But I think too, we could have foreseen this a bit more if we'd been paying attention to the broader markets in 2022. And that's where, because we're at the intersection between the customer and the company, we're not just customer success leaders, we're business leaders. And I think it's really incumbent upon us to understand what's happening in the general sort of macroeconomics and marketplace. And if we take a look at how, what's happening with interest rates and understand how then that impacts, our general business and tech in particular, startups in particular are reliant on what's happening with interest rates because that impacts investors and what they have as opportunities, right? When money didn't cost anything, investors could throw a bunch of money at tech. And if you had an idea, you could get funding, right? Whereas now you really have to prove yourself. Now what you're looking at is metrics like revenue per employee, right? Or costs per employee, margin per employee, right? And that's the kind of thing that it isn't just the CFO that should be looking at that. That's something that CS leaders, because we're at the intersection between the customer and the company, we should be thinking about, right? And so I think that we're going to continue seeing that in 2024. And then the only other thing I would add in is also what's happened in this last year is the explosion of generative AI and how AI is now accessible to everyone. In the same way that you see computers are accessible to everyone just because it's in your hand now, that's how generative AI is, that's how AI is. Right. And so it's incumbent upon us too, especially in 2024, to think about how we're using AI in small and big ways every day. And it literally should be incorporated into what you do throughout the day, the same way you would have used, like you would have Googled it. Now you need to, I don't know if we should call it ChatGPT, but or Chatty or whatever people want to call it. But certainly, yeah, we do need a verb, and I'd call it more generally Gen AI, right? Because there's going to be so many different ways that we're going to use it in all of our tools. And that's really, something that I think we want to engage in and embrace, not only for productivity, but for the trends that we'll get from the data that we'll be cleaning that Erika talks about, and to the end goal of being, creating sustainable and durable growth for our customers and for our companies.
Thanks for those insights. And before we move on, I'd like to bring our audience into the conversation, and I want to publish a quick poll because I'm curious what's their take on this year and what were their challenges, and I want to debate on those challenges. So give me 1 sec to be able to publish the poll. Go.
I'm very curious. I'm very curious to see what comes up.
I know, but all three of us also said three different things.
Do you see the poll?
Not yet.
Okay.
I don't see the poll. I always love polls.
Yeah. I love the polls too. I'm very curious.
You have to hit the polls button on the right, and then it'll come up.
Okay. Okay. Let's try to. Hopefully, everyone can. Let me ask the people if they can. Oh no, it's people started to vote. We're gonna give it a few more minutes, and I encourage everyone to vote because because your votes will give a different flavor to our conversation. So give it a few.
There's no surprise with what I'm seeing.
That's
what I thought.
That's what I thought.
What I thought will happen.
The biggest challenge.
Managing and reducing. So as we speak, is managing and reducing customer churn. Somebody voted other. I'm curious if they wanna reveal what was that other. I wanna pick the brain of our guests and try.
Oh wow, we have almost like a tie between three things.
Oh my god. So now it's managing
churn. Managing and reducing customer churn, of course.
And also aligning CS strategies with the overall business goal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay. So they only had one. I wanted to mention for transparency, they only had one option, so they could only pick one thing from the whole thing. And we have managing and reducing customer churn. We have scaling CS operations. Okay, and the second it's CS, so scaling and aligning the CS strategies with the overall business goals. For the ones who published other, please post in the chat what were those, so we can discuss a bit about those as well. Give it a few more minutes. But somehow this actually sets the perfect stage for the next topic. Not every, and you, Anika, mentioned it at the very beginning, not every strategy unfolds as planned. And but this gives us, I would say, the chance to learn some valuable lessons. Erika, our audience pinpointing as biggest challenging reducing churn, scaling the CS operations, and I would also mention aligning the CS strategies. Why do you think we encountered those type of challenges, and what should we do to prepare if those changes remain next year? How can we prepare? First of all, let's understand why and what can we do better.
Sure. And I'm going to tie my answer very similarly to what I shared on data in the beginning of this webinar. I feel like one of the things that we should do better for sure to manage the expectations and reduce churn for 2024 and what we've learned from 2023 is making sure that we have proactive customer engagement, that with data analytics, we can learn more about what customers are doing and start being more proactive instead of reactive, For me, this year was a very reactive year because I didn't have this data. And a way that we could solve for this challenge is to make sure that we have good health scores implemented, that we have ways to inform our CSMs of red flags that's happening with their customers, that we can implement an engagement model where we have automated messages, personalized messages that can be sent to these customers to prevent them from stop using our tool or for stop seeing value of the solution that we're bringing to them. So for me, one way that we could solve for this is definitely working on that engagement model that can help us better stay communicated with our customers and make sure that they are delivering that we are delivering value across their engagement journey with us. So um, that's what I would do to reduce churn.
Thank you for the insights. Jen, why do you think the CS strategy fell short in 2023? And what do you believe is the main reason behind its ineffectiveness?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, we're constantly evolving, in terms of our SaaS tech business. If you think back to 15, 20 years ago, even product was talking about customer delight, right? And what was CS? It was the happiness department. And there's still a little bit of hangover from that, right? Where we're trying to serve our customers, make them happy. And if they have a support issue, yeah, sure, we'll dig in, we'll help you with that. Well, that's the wrong thing to do. Exactly. We have a support team. And by taking on a support issue instead of your support team, now they don't have the ability to track it or to create, education materials for it or to be preemptive around it or any of those things. So you're not only taking away from your support team, you're also taking away from your customer, because instead of helping them with the strategic ways that they can be using the product and meeting their business objectives, you're helping them with a support issue, which can be addressed in so many other ways that are much more efficient and effective. So you're not focusing your time then on what can really help your customer. And that's all in the name of happiness, right? And frankly, a lot of happy customers churn for a lot of different reasons, because happiness isn't the core reason of why they stay. They come for a business reason. So I think, what you need to focus on is what's going to have impact, right? What's going to have impact for your customers, what's going to have impact for your own company and your own business, and think about what that intersection is and where they marry. And that's where you want to focus your time. There's so many things we can be doing in a day. You don't have the time to not be effective or efficient with your time.
On the chat, Steve mentioned that one of his CS challenges this year was maintaining the perceived value of CS during tough time. And what I want to ask you is, how do you advocate internally for your CS teams, and how do you make sure that your peers see the value? So what's the narrative that you bring into the companies that you are working, or not necessarily? Anika, I want to start with you this time. How do you pitch for your team? How do you prove the value of the CS?
I feel like my whole career has been pitching the value of customer success internally. Luckily, my current organization is very much aligned on this, but that's just the newest organization I've been at. But in my previous roles, I feel like you're constantly trying to provide value of what we do. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we measure ourselves on a lagging indicator rather than a leading indicator. And due to that, a lot of the value of customer success isn't tied back into a business per se. And if you think about how a business works, it's ultimately a profit and loss statement. How much money do you make? How much loss does a business make? And more times than not, customer success is tied to the loss leader rather than the profit center, due to the fact of the way that we are perceived, due to, I think, my personal experience is that we use NRR as our leading metric, which is actually a lagging metric because it's something that you're looking back to try to forecast the future. But as we know, stellar NRR in 2021 and 22 led to not so stellar NRR in 2023. So if that's not evidence enough that we're measuring based on a lagging indicator, then I don't know what else is. But to bring back to Steve's point about perceived value in CS and how you align that internally, other than making sure as a leader, but even as a CSM, that your value is towards a leading metric that's bringing profit into the business. That's my first standpoint on that. I very much believe in aligning the wider team to the entire customer journey. So that means that from your BDRs to your CFO to your support engineers to the product managers, everyone should know exactly what's happening with the customer from the day they hit your website to the day they exit your company. And I think that a lot, if I were to ask some engineers in some companies, they wouldn't know how an onboarding of a customer would work. And the same thing goes for, I don't know, an SDR or a BDR. They're still working on building this pipeline for sales to close, but they have no idea what happens once that sale is closed. So in order to really show the value of customer success, you should have a lagging metric as your team metric, but you should also really align what the heck you're doing across all your teams. And you can say that till your face turns blue, but it is an active thing that you have to continue making sure you're doing across teams as well. So those are my two things.
Erika, do you wanna build on what Anika said? What's your view on this? I have a question afterwards with for you, Anika, but I want to pick Erika's brain on this as well.
Yes, sure. I completely agree with Anika's point on this. I think customer success should be ingrained in every department on the organization, and I think business is measured on revenue, right? Leaders care about revenue, which is why we're always looking into NRR and GRR and how much CSQLs we're closing, and if we're closing these deals, and how are we helping sales to sell more, referrals, and all of these things that customer success is also doing and sometimes are left unnoticed, right? So I feel like for CS to be able to continue getting the budget that they need and making sure that they continue to grow customer success departments in the future, we need to continue to communicate all of these metrics on how we contribute to that revenue line and how we are helping the company grow and how we're helping our customers better achieve their business outcomes, right? So it's a little bit of everything, and as Anika said, making sure that we're looking into the whole customer journey and not just where customer success takes place. So,
I was just going to say, actually, another thing that we can do is actually take a page in the book of the pre-sales motion. If you look at the way that RevOps will sort of dissect every single moment in time in the pre-sales motion, they know what's happening with the conversion points and what their conversion rates are at every moment. And as CS leaders, we can actually take a look at the post-sales motion in a similar way. If we know how the sales to CS handoff is taking place, who's involved and engaged, and just kind of look at any sort of things that we can measure with that and keep track of that for each of our accounts, then take a look at how long onboarding is taking, when they're getting their time to first value, when are they launching, what's taking place with adoption, how many people are adopting and how quickly. Are they optimizing? What things should they be doing to optimize? When and how have they optimized? If you're tracking all of the things that we're generally trying to do in these qualitative ways, but also track it in a quantitative way, we can start to understand how we're doing sort of tracking those conversion points for our customers, and then how that leads to renewals and expansions in a way that then that's basically money. And so when you take a look at all of those activities, because so often the pre-sales folks or people who are overworking in product and engineering, they don't understand what's happening in our area any more than we understand what's happening in their area. But they do sort of assume like, oh, they signed on the dotted line, throw it over the fence, and now it's just going to happen. except for it doesn't just happen. And if we can actually track and show what those conversion points are, how it leads to revenue, and how we can make improvements in those areas to then lead to better revenue, then we can also show what we're actually doing and what we're achieving that leads to the revenue numbers, right? And it's all of that we then can start to relay back as we communicate. Oh, we improved this conversion metric here in onboarding. We expect that to have some impact later on when we're doing renewals or expansions, that sort of thing, right? And so it's really important to not just communicate the qualitative ways and have the stories because people relate to the stories, but also back it up with the quantitative.
Thanks for those insights and the completion, Jen. I promised Pam a question. It's in the context. She asked which leading metric should CS focus. It was tailored to you, Anika, and she also presented a bit of background. It's in customer education, and she said we can focus on what classes or content is created and what customers consume. What leading metric can you show?
Happy to address the first on the leading metric on the CS focus piece. For me personally, like I said, NRR it's a great metric because it's showing you how much obviously you've grown over the last year, but it's really hard to predict future revenue based on NRR because as we know, what's changed over time. But for me, I look at how Jan, just adding on to what Jan said, what the pre-sales or sales team use as motions or metrics. If you think about it, a sales team thinks about close one rate, or they think about SQL to MQL rate, and they think about all of these metrics that tie directly back to future revenue, forecastable revenue. So if you take that same logic, which I think we should all do, by the way, I think CS gets really drawn away from sales, and I don't know why, but I'm hoping that narrative changes. But if you take the same concept of how sales forecast in that way for close one rate or like conversion rate, take the same things and use those as forecasting to future. So I would say time to value. I would say when we're talking about renewal intent or renewal rates as well, I would also talk about, CSQL to closed one rates. Those are all forecastable future rates that you can start to predict to that profit line of a business. So what I would say is leading indicators in customer success is any metric that ties to revenue towards profit towards the business. And I think it was Jan that said that we're all business leaders, which is, I couldn't agree any more to that. And how we become business leaders is how we tie those metrics to that profit piece. So, and I don't know if I can answer to the customer education part. I do believe consumption is a good point though, Pam.
I think the customer education part was just to provide a bit of context. The way I understand it was the industry she is activating on. Pam, feel free to develop on chat, and we'll pick it later on at the end of the conversation. Now, I wanna flip the coin. We talked, I would say, about 2023. I want to discuss into 2024. And as we approach it, from my perspective, the emphasis isn't just on major breakthroughs, but also on those small milestones, everyday steps that lead to the overall growth. Jen, can you share some realistic goals or milestones that CSMs should aim for the next year to ensure that they are making steady progress?
Steady progress towards
the big ambitious, big hairy goals, towards their goals. I would say, because we all start by having ambitious goals, but then we end there by step by step, and we do that every day. So what are those small things that basically contributes to the overall big picture?
Yeah, and this is something I'm sure that both Erika and Anika would also emulate, because I have a lot of respect for them for them both as CS leaders and CSM. But what I would say is that think about, what are your company goals? What are your customers' goals? How, and where do they intersect, and where do you have an impact, right? And thinking about those larger goals, then you want to break them down into, what does that mean? If this is what's going to happen over the year, what does that mean for the quarter? What does that mean for the month? What does that mean for this week? And how can I then break in my day, to devote time towards these activities each day? Because we only get there step by step. And so if you're, analyzing, your overall conversion rates, that are leading towards adoption, optimization, renewals, and expansion, and you can see that, like, you have some sort of leak in your bucket in some place, like, which one is the biggest one that you need to have an impact on? Try and work on that one first. It's also, who's the writer, the 1%, kind of
Atomic
improvements. Atomic Habits. I know, because we've read that, we've talked about it. So it always gets down to those atomic habits, right? That you don't get to the big goals without working on them in small ways every day. But oftentimes we forget to work on them in small ways. And so think about how you can break down your big lofty goals, but also be sure to identify what they are. Connect what you're doing in CS to your business. Connect what you're doing in your CS role to your customer's business. If it doesn't have that connection, it probably isn't that important. Think about how to make an impact by working on the critical things that are going to move the needle.
Erika, what small but in the same time significant steps would you suggest CSMs focus on for the substantial progress next year?
First thing, I am going to use that Atomic Habits reference from Jan, because first of all, I love Atomic Habits, and I think that succeeding as a CSM in 2024 has everything to do with habits. So one of the first milestones I would say CSMs need to really, really deep dive into next year is making sure that they have a lot of knowledge into their customers, meaning have clearly identified their business goals, what challenges they're facing, drill down and build those success plans, because success plans are what help customers achieve their goals, right? So if we don't have clarity on what those goals are, or we don't have clarity on what challenges they're facing, we will never be helping them get to their point B, right? So that's the first thing that I would do. And then another thing that I would focus my energy on as a CSM is communicating with leadership all of those roadblocks that you see of places where during that customer journey you're seeing friction, right? So if you're seeing friction on the support side or you're seeing friction on the onboarding side, or you have a process improvement that you can bring to your leadership team on how to fix those gaps, I would focus energy on that as well. And finally, back again to data, back again to usage, back again to monitoring health, making sure that you're always and constantly reviewing the data that you have from your customers so you can make better and informed decisions to help them get to their business outcomes. So those are the three mini achievements I would say that I will focus on to make sure that I'm succeeding in 2024.
Anika, what's your perspective on this?
I mean, Jan really covered the whole 1% thing. I'm a big believer in that, by the way. Like, in every aspect of my life, I try to take one more step from yesterday to today, for example. So I'm a very big believer in habit stacking, but also making a 1% change. So I also really believe in reflection. I do monthly reflections on what I've done really well in the last month and what I plan on changing in the future months. So if I were to look at 2023 and think about any of the learnings or takeaways that I had, I would then try to apply what I'm trying to learn from 2023 into 2024. And I would also say that in order to be proactive, you need to be able to find a balance between the firefighting and what you proactively want to do. And the only way to be able to do that is to balance both each month. So know that you're going to be reactive. Like, I don't think we will ever move away from that world. Like, as much as we want to be, and as much as we were going to say, I have every strategy and every playbook to be proactive, like shit's gonna come up. Sorry, said bad words, but things are gonna come up, and we're not gonna avoid that. But what you do have to do is be able to balance that proactive, and whether that's one strategy a month or one thing you're doing differently each day, I would say just take what you've learned. So did you firefight too much on churn, or did you not have a very strong renewals playbook from last year? Or was your onboarding really weak and you ended up going over time to value? Take data, metrics, points, whatever you didn't hit in 23 and tweak it slightly and do it again, one per day, one per month, whatever is attainable, and know that, you know, that there is balance. We are going to be firefighters at some point, but we also need to be proactive at the other side too.
Mm-hmm. I wanna ask you about budgeting and customer success for 2024, and there's no way I can sugarcoat it or introduce it rather than direct. We live in a, I would say, shady economic context where every penny counts and every decision needs to be argumented. So how we defend and allocate our CS budget becomes more important than ever, if you ask me. Erika, I'd like to start the discussion with you. With budgets being closely watched, what strategies would you recommend for not only defending the CS budget, but also ensuring it's allocated in a way that maximizes the impact and the value?
I feel like it all tracks back to revenue and how we measure it. So for CS leaders to be able to secure their budget to 2024, they need to clearly quantify the ROI, the return on investment that we're bringing to the organization. And I think one of the easiest way to do that is to tie them back to the metrics that you're measuring, whether it's NRR, gross revenue retention, CSQLs, referrals, anything that your team is responsible for that contributes to that revenue line. You need to make it clear. You need to communicate it constantly. It's not just like every quarter, like sharing customer success stories, that things that have gone well and where your team has had a big impact that brings back to revenue. So it's all about how you communicate those metrics to secure the budget.
Jen, what's your take on this, on the budgeting? What's your recommendation?
Well, this is where getting close to your CFO is important, and understanding what investors are looking for. So things like Rule of 40, how are you contributing to Rule of 40, both in terms of profitability as well as growth is important, because that's what investors are really looking for, especially if your company is at 20 million or above overall revenue. But then you want to take a look at too, what is your margin? You know, what are you contributing, both in terms of revenue as well as costs, and on a per employee basis, how are you contributing to that revenue? What is the cost of contributing to that revenue? If you can understand those metrics and speak to that, then of course you also want to, you know, be able to show this is what we're using humans to do. This is what we're spending on our tools. And you know, oftentimes too, if you're an early stage company, people are instead of, you know, building out their product, they're throwing humans at it. This was especially the case back when it was growth at any cost. You would throw humans at it when you couldn't afford the engineers to build things out, et cetera. Or you were moving on to the MVP, leaving a lot of customer friction in the wake, right? And that sort of thing. So what you want to take a look at is, where could you reduce the number of humans who, where it could otherwise be products that is built out more efficiently, or tools that could be used. And what I mean by that isn't so much about reducing the humans, although you may be asked to do that. And frankly, CS leaders have been asked to do that several times, even with their own teams in 1 year, right? There hasn't just been one round of layoffs in many companies. There's been several. But regardless, you also need to understand, what are the trade-offs. If you are going to make me remove another human, from this team, I can't do as much as I did before. Or if you're going to do that, we need to then make certain that we say have a CS ops person who's going to manage this additional tool, and we can trade it off in that way. But really, not only understanding what are the overall metrics that the business is looking at and how you contribute to that and the margins, but then also showing what the actual impact is to the business. And again, looking at those conversion points throughout the process and what the impact on those might be. So that might even make a decision. You might decide that you're going to keep an additional onboarding person and not have as many CSMs, and then do more tech touch. If you can do it in a smart way, or in a way that doesn't impact your business too greatly, you can arrange things a little differently. You have to think about how you're going to structure the team in order to still achieve the most important goals, and think about how it's contributing to the margins of both revenue and cost in that way. And what sort of trade-offs you can do. Frankly, it's a time to be creative as a leader, and it's hard because you also know that you're impacting your team, and these are humans that you know. These are people that you care about. But sometimes they can switch over into other roles, and you can help them do that. Other times it's just time for them to move on, unfortunately, just because your business, in order to stay in business, can't afford as many humans as it once had. So that's some of the things I would think about.
For me, working in marketing, I see this as a paradox. So everybody knows what's customer success. Everybody talks about it. Everybody speaks about its value. But when it comes to cutting budgets, they are the first department from where we are cutting, or from where we are taking the budget. Anika, what's your take on this? How do you secure your budget for next year? How does your budget look like for next year?
Well, budget's already done for next year, but I can speak to. I had to do that like a month ago, but I can speak to definitely the struggles of budgeting in general, and what I think CS leaders and CSMs are facing. And I can echo everything Erika and Jan has already said. I'm a big believer in a 4-step process, and I've talked about this in a number of talks I've given, which is people, process, repeatability, and tools. It's very basic, but it's how you build and scale teams. We already have the people piece. We've already figured that one out. We definitely have hired, overhired, underhired, whatever. We've hired the people. I definitely think that when you think of budgeting and how to be creative within your budgeting, you have to think about the process you're building, and is that process repeatable? Because the number one thing I've heard this year is do more with less, and figure out more with less, whether that's less people, less tools, less insights, whatever it is, it's more with less. And being creative with that is up to you on how you do that. But I also believe in being creative with that process and repeatability piece, because for example, you can build a process on a whiteboard. You can build a process on a piece of paper. You can build a process on a spreadsheet. It does not need something fancy, first of all. So if you don't have the budget, you have other tools literally in front of you to do that. And the second thing is, before you go out to market to buy a tool, the reason tools are the last step in my people process repeatability is there are definitely tools that are just in front of you that you can use, that the company is already paying for, that you should be using before you go and reach for budget for other things. Because to be honest, we're not going to get the easiest yes from our CFOs right now. And it's easier to build out a process and repeatability and then go ask for the budget once you've built that out, because you've proven a model. So as a tangible thing, I would say go build a some sort of data visualization in Excel, and build a graph. You don't need a BI tool or data analytics right away, but Excel is magical. And if you don't know how to use it, there's YouTube. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can figure out and be creative. And I just think that with budgeting, it's just, we have to be super creative, and there's so much right in front of us. And I think when cash was cheap, we were like, okay, hire the people. We'll build a process while we buy a tool. Then we don't have that luxury anymore. So when it comes to budgeting, I would just say be very mindful of where you're spending your money, but also be very resourceful and very creative with what you have in front of you. So that's my 2 cents on budgeting.
Resourcefulness is a great skill for customer success leaders for sure.
I think so. I feel like we should all go and endorse each other on LinkedIn if that's still a thing. Like resourcefulness has to be a typical like trait in customer success.
Yep.
If you, with your permission, I'm gonna start addressing some of the questions. And Amber, I pushed it on the screen. With the current tough economic climate, how does a customer success manager stand out for promotions and/or new job opportunities, since these are harder to come by? Who wants to have a first round of answers on this?
I can, or Erika, I think you're going to talk. Go
Erika.
Well, this is something that I've been trying to do too, and the way that I've seen works the best is bringing your own metrics and advocating for what you've done over the year, right? So if you can look back into what you did in 2023, how much revenue you brought, how many upsells you brought, if you received any reviews from customers, any customer stories that you shared, anything that you've done that speaks to revenue, put it in a document, in a star document, where you can say, oh, this is what I achieved this year, this is why I deserve a promotion, and this is what I'm doing to get that next promotion, right? So I feel people are numeric. I am numeric. I feel leaders are numeric too. So if you are able to bring all of those numbers together, you can probably convince them to get you that promotion. So at least that's the way I see it. That's what I've been doing for myself, and it's worked in the past. Maybe not for next year, but let's see how that goes.
I couldn't agree more, by the way. And the only thing I would add to what Erika just said is I think we do this all the time as CSMs, and you should do it when you're advocating for your own promotion, is make the math make sense. So just like Erika brought her numbers and showed her ROI to the business, she was like, listen, this is how much I get paid. This is what I do that hits these numbers. I deserve a promotion because actually I've made the business X number of dollars. And that's a great narrative, but that's also making the math make sense for your leader. So I would say if you are advocating for a promotion or a new role in a tough economic climate where budgets are tighter than ever, make sure the math makes sense, because if you can't do that, then is it really justified? And also, if you can't justify it, definitely no one else is going to justify it for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Erika actually did a YouTube video and has a Google sheet where you can actually track all of the numbers around your accounts. And we featured that on CS Office Hours. What was that, in November, I guess, early November. We're going to get a YouTube channel up for the recordings.
If you want to share it with the audience, and if you find the link, please do. If not, I'm going to make sure that on the repost and on this recording, we're also going to send that template, because I think indeed it's useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing too, even for CS leaders, you want to think about how you can step up as a business leader. Perhaps you're not considered part of the executive leadership team. It's really critical for your customers and your company that you are part of that executive leadership team. And so, it's the way you present your understanding of the metrics and the ways that you're contributing to the revenue versus the cost and what those margins are and all of that. You want to be able to speak to that, as well as a way of bringing in that voice of the customer so that you can project what you see as the opportunities for 2024 and each quarter, and also some of the challenges and where the at-risk accounts are and where you can address it as a team, as a company together, right? Because sometimes it's something around the product that needs to be addressed. Sometimes it's a tweak in how you go to market with marketing and sales that can bring in either better ICPs, that are going to create more revenue for your business. You want to think about all the ways that you can share the information that you're getting from your customers, share it back with your company, both to improve what you're doing with revenue and also to sort of fix the leaky buckets. And if they see you as the primary resource for that information, then they need you in every executive conversation. And that's how they should be seeing CS. And if they don't see it that way, it is incumbent upon you to figure out how to speak in those terms for your specific customer base and product for your business, because that's how you make a difference, not just for your own career, not just for your CS team, but for your customers in your company.
Because we only have nine minutes. What can I say, Jen? You were right when you said that I prepared so many topics, and with all three of you, we won't have time. So I'm gonna promise the audience or a redo on this exactly formula if all three of you accept, and we do a take two, I would say, on the that I didn't discuss. But now I want to take the questions from the audience, and the one from Liz. What distinguishes the customer success approach for end users compared to businesses purchasing the software and employees being the end user?
I am not sure if I understand the
I'm
question.
trying to understand as well.
Me too.
I think you're talking about like what approaches should you use for your champion versus executive buyer. That's what that's what I'm reading that as. But feel free to correct me in the chat if I said that wrong. But I'll have my first stab at it. If that is the question, how do you distinguish strategies around an executive buyer versus your everyday champion or using the product? I would say that with an executive buyer, usually that person has bought a product and they want to know the outcome or the results of that product. So unless you're talking about ROI or the math or the metrics, that person is probably looking for that piece, versus the champion or everyday end user that you mentioned is going to use for best practices. They're going to use for efficiencies. They're going to use for how to get, the most out of the software with new product releases. So I would say if those are the two personas, that's my take on it, on how you should differentiate your strategies on something towards metrics versus something towards actual usage of the product.
And I wanna take another deep dive a bit. How do you because they have different outcomes, the executive buyer versus the day-to-day users. How do you prioritize, or if how do you make sure that both of them are happy if they have I would say not necessarily different goals, but the milestones, the expectations are different? Do you try to satisfy the executive buyer to make sure that, your tool where the expense remains, or do you focus on the ones that are using it on a day-to-day?
Yeah, just to sort of to answer that question, but also to build on what Anika was just saying, I think what you can do, and this is where there's maybe a difference between being a high touch CSM versus if you're looking at sort of low touch and that sort of thing. But still, there are basically personas within a company, and you want to understand and sort of architect what those personas generally are. If you're a high touch CSM, then you're going to go a little deeper and be very specific for each company that you're managing in your book of business to understand who those different players are. There are some that are going to be influencers. There are others going to be decision makers, still others that may be actual end users. Understanding generally what they need. You may be able to deliver on that in one-to-many ways, say like with the end users, or maybe able to provide information back to product in terms of ways that certain challenges that they're having and using the product, or new opportunities for what they need from your product that you might even be able to upsell to them, right? If it's helping them achieve their business goals. Otherwise, it's going to make them more sticky to your product and less likely to churn, right? And understanding what those types of things are. What when you're asking for something like that, when you're strategically looking across your book of business as a CSM or across your overall business, if you're a CS leader, you want to understand kind of what's going to have the most impact across all of your accounts or in terms of your ARR, right? Then also you want to take a look in terms of what you're prioritizing. Again, that goes back to what's going to have the biggest impact in terms of revenue, and also not just short term, but also long term. Are there going to be some things that you need to sort of work towards building day by day, and other things that are perhaps in the more reactive sense, or just I need to be proactive about that this week kind of thing? But you want to sort of take a look at, and basically structure it out and look at what's happening across your book of business or across your customer base in terms of what's important in that way. So I'd love to say make this one your top priority, but it also depends on what's generally more at risk or on fire. If you don't have many relationships with your executive buyers across the board, and that's what's leading to the most churn, that is not uncontrollable churn. I worked with a company that just tried to say that having no relationship with executive buyers was uncontrollable churn. That's not it. You can control that. That is then your biggest fire that you need to address. And how do you address that methodically, and how do you understand that persona? So it also depends upon what your biggest pain point is. Yeah.
We have one more question that I don't want to end the webinar without answering all of them. So that's from Clayton. Being from the Caribbean, the position of CS is rather new in comparison to the world. Going in the speed of way CS is evolving worldwide. How do I balance and manage to keep connected to the developing speed of the Caribbean regarding using data B/C, not sure, of the markets here? I'm also reading it as we speak to make sure that I clarify it.
I mean, I'll take a stab. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right, but I would say from a part of the world that customer success is understood. I think that's the basis of that. I'm American from the accent, but I've spent the last 13 years in Europe, and Europe tends to follow the trend of what the US does when it comes to customer success. I would say finding the right thing that works in your region is also extremely important. So I don't know the Caribbean market that well, but you do, and taking and learning from other markets, I would say would be a great way to make sure you up the speed of what's important to ramp up in the Caribbean, because using data or market trends might not be normal there. But what I would say is it's not new. You have other markets that you can learn from, and there's other ways that you can utilize what, I don't know, the US or Europe or Asia Pacific is doing in customer success and apply it to your own market. So even though it's new in the Caribbean, I would say that the brilliant thing is that it's not that new to the world. So you can bring a lot of the trends that the other markets are doing into the Caribbean market. So that's my answer to that. I hope it answered it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer.
I know that we only have 1 minute, and I'm going to ask all of you to remain for 2 more minutes, because I don't want to end it up before I'm going one more round and ask each and every one of you to provide a piece of advice for CSM for next year. So what's one piece of advice that you would like to share with the CSM? Anika,
do you want to start?
Yeah. Anika, Erika, and we end up with Jen. This is how I see it on my.
Well, my piece of advice is that I personally believe that customer success is the bridge between customer outcomes and company revenue. And I think the way that bridge is built and what we need to measure to get there and how we get our teams there is up to the leaders of today. And I don't just mean customer success leaders. You don't have to have a leadership title in your role to do that. You can be a CSM, but you need to be that translator between customer outcomes and business revenue. And I think if I could give advice going into 2024, figure out what that means for your business and try to apply that to how you work as a CSM day in and day out. So that's my piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
Erika?
Who's that?
Yeah, for me, the piece of advice that I would give CSMs is to get comfortable selling. It kind of like ties with what Anika just said. If you are the type of CSM who is scared about sales or who doesn't want to have anything to do with upselling or things that they're not good at it, you should change your mindset for next year. You need to make sure that you're leveraging your sales skills in a way, because it's going to be a very important metric, and it is. I mean, it's been for 2023. It's going to continue to be an important metric for 2024. And the more that we get comfortable with that selling piece, the better that we'll do for next year.
Yeah. On Erika's point, someone needs to trust you in order to purchase from you. And people are most likely in the organization going to trust the CSM. And selling is about selling to the right person, the right product at the right time. In the pre-sales motion, those things don't all have to be aligned because they have more time and they can always, find the right person, talk about the right product, or maybe it isn't, so they move on, or if it's not the right time, they can nurture it and come back. When it's a CSM, you are the one who is most likely to understand who the right person is. And it is incumbent upon you to know who the right person is. You need to know if it's the right time. You need to know what the right product is. You are the one in your organization that's most likely to know all three of those things. And it's a disservice to the customer if you don't offer it up, because then they can't achieve their business outcomes and objectives that they're looking to do. So you really should be the one who's bringing all of that up, whether it results in a CSQL or if you're actually doing the contract with it. Those are all skills that you can, work through in the details, but you are the one, and have confidence in that. And then the last thing I would just say is ChatGPT. Go get a $20 account for that. Go and use it every day. Absolutely. So, just if there's anything you do, ChatGPT, start using Gen AI.
AI.
Mm-hmm.
And with this being said, I think that's a wrap. A huge thanks to Anika, Erika, and Jen. You were fantastic, and I'm sure everyone got a lot out of this. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in and being such an engaged crowd. Now, as we all head into holidays, I hope you get some well-deserved rest and have a blast. Happy holidays, everyone, and let's all recharge for an awesome 2024. Catch you all next time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Have a great one, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.